Greetings, fellow keepers and fellow Kongers. It's Soniel here with the Keeper's Corner, and we're going to be checking out some hero battles. A couple different things I wanted to talk about, and some of which by request. Firstly, the difference between Wizards Chosen teams and traditional live battle teams. Some of you may have noticed that in some of my videos, I use a different team setup in Wizards Chosen than I do in hero battles. And part of the reason for that is, of course, the Wizards Chosen has a number of hodgepodge teams of weaker heroes. They're also not as smart as the average player. Their targeting is usually single targeted towards one hero. They don't switch up their targets and spread out their stuns. You don't have to worry about as many mass dispels and things like that. So as a result, in Wizards Chosen, this particular team here has tremendous synergy. You've got the Valkyrie here, who has her Light of Wrath ability, which is very comparable to the Spell Sword's energy reserves, as we've talked about before, along with her Shield of Wrath, that gives her the ability to hold out the front line as a pseudo-tank here, and the Angelic Volley, which is going to give her some ability to deal some AoE damage as well, and spreading that AoE damage in Wizards Chosen teams is very easy because not many of them run a taunt in the front line. So if they're running a 1-3 lineup with no taunt, that Angelic Volley is going to, of course, hit those back three. And we're going to want to use the Counterspell and Lightning damage passives on her. With the Kensai, we're looking at the Blade Meditation, Inner Focus, and Whirlwind Strike. We're not going to be using the Vital Strike here in place of Inner Focus. At earlier levels, maybe in the 30s to 40s, mid to low 40s as well. If you have a good, perfect katana, or if you perhaps even have a Vorpal sword from the Gem Master event, running both Vital Strike and Whirlwind Strike with just the Blade Meditation here can usually be a lot better for you because it's going to give you better overall DPS, as the fact that your enemies are going to have weaker armor when they don't have epic armor and things available to them. But it's going to give you 3 attack cycles on the Kensai, which is going to really speed him up for you. You pair him with a hero like the War Master and his Battle Fury, along with another quick hero like the Shaman and a decent taunt to keep them alive, and you're going to be able to outdamage most of your need for healing in those earlier level brackets. And of course, with his passives, we're looking at the attack passive and the critical passive. There is some value to the cooldown reduction if you don't want to run the critical. However, part of what we're looking for here is those large critical hits. And we're just using our traditional Mystic setup, the same as we use on any classic Doom team. That's going to be Foretell, Disenchant, Confuse, and her bonuses to cooldown reduction and all resistances. The War Master is going to be running Heavy Bash, as well as the Battle Fury, and Call to Arms with his attack damage passive and his armor and all resistance passives. You can, of course, substitute Safety Ward on the Mystic and take Charge on the War Master. That's going to give you basically 2 pseudo heals, as they're both enemy or abilities that generate bonus HP. So if you're trying to use this team in Wizards Chosen and you're not surviving very well, that's going to really help you out. And I will have a look here really quickly. We did try this team out a little bit in live battles, and it does have some success against some enemy team makeups. Again, if the enemy has a well-placed spell sword, or if they're running a necromancer, they can really put the kibosh on this Kensai Valkyrie team. And part of the reason the necromancer's fear is more powerful than the samurai's demon shout in that regard is that the demon shout can be dispelled by the mystic before Whirlwind Strike. The fear ability from the Necromancer is going to always go off after her first disenchant, and it's going to prevent you from getting that full damage output on the Whirlwind Strike. But as you can see here, the Angelic Volley paired with the Whirlwind Strike has pretty much taken out the entire back line here. We finish her off with just that Melt Armor, and then all they have to deal with is the Blackguard, and one perfect strike with those damage modifiers is usually going to take out most enemies in 1 to 2 hits. The problem with running that team in live battles, of course, is that with some simple targeting changes, you can really disable most of that team's synergy before it happens. And if that Whirlwind Strike goes off with no damage modifiers, you're pretty much dead in the water. And the Valkyrie as well doesn't really have a ton of tanking ability despite her very, very high defense and health ratings until that Shield of Wrath goes off. If the Shield of Wrath never hits, then you're going to be really slowed down in her ability to tank. and a pairing of just a shaman and a blackguard with good enough power ratings are going to take her out in a heartbeat. In lower level brackets, you're typically going to want to run your Valkyrie with the on death ability and a resurrection hero. That's going to give you the best value from her at lower stars. Traditionally, because Light of Wrath combined with the damage from that burst on death passive is going to always give you the soul energy you need to revive her with a cleric. You throw in a Templar as a fourth, and you've got a double resurrection setup where it's very, very difficult for the enemy to take out your Valkyrie. And every time they try, they just take more damage on themselves. Now, shield tactics can, of course, sometimes cause us to put out some extra damage on the Valkyrie due to her melt armor ability. There are no defense debuffs on this team, unfortunately, but if you are using her with the Barbarian or the Necromancer, and they throw up a shield tactics, and then you debuff the defense they gained, the armor that they gained is actually going to work against them in most situations. Although the damage boost from melt armor on higher armor percentage isn't super huge, with enemies like the Vampire Lords that use the gaseous form ability, they gain 98% armor, and it really almost doubles her damage from melt armor. But as you can see, that particular team is incredibly quick there. And another difference you'll see is because we've moved the Mystic out of the traditional Doom setup here, we do lose the Cleanse ability, but we have the damage boosts on the Ranger from target weakness, the damage boosts on the Blackguard from deadliness and find weakness, of course the Shaman's base attack percent modifier and his passive abilities, and the Spell Sword's bonuses to Power Strike. Again, any heroes that have percent-based damage modifiers to one or more of their skills or to their attack rating are usually going to be the heroes that can do damage sufficiently well without the assistance of debuffs and buffs and all those other things. They're what I call standalone heroes. So this is a pretty good setup of 4 standalone heroes that allows us to apply most of our synergy and utility heroes into one team and greatly boost their output, while this team doesn't suffer too greatly. Now, it's a little bit slower than the first team. As you can see, we're going to probably take about 150 seconds to finish this match. The Valkyrie team can very often finish the Wizard's Chosen in 25 to 35 or 40 seconds. So you're going to get some matches that last a little bit longer, but this is going to really be one of the faster ways to do Wizard's Chosen. And of course, there are other substitute teams for the Kensai and for the Valkyrie. We'll take a quick look at swapping those heroes around really quickly. Unfortunately, I don't have all of the pieces for those other teams put together yet, but I can tell you that there is a tremendous amount of success from other players in using the Kensai with the Cavalier. With a higher level Cavalier, or higher star Cavalier, the penalty on his victory or death to defense is rather low. Traditionally, if you're going to be using him as a proper tank at higher levels, you're going to want to be using the Rage of Rhaegon, which we can see is the second to last epic weapon here. It gives about 200 total defense fully maxed out, as well as 8% to magic resistances and a percentage to dodge. So it really greatly increases his ability to be a frontline tank. But his passive bonus to physical damage is going to further boost the Kensai. And in this setup here too, you can either swap out the War Master for the Spell Sword, or you can keep the War Master and swap out the Mystic for a 4th DPS hero, or for the Cleric or Druid if you need some sustain on that team. And as we talked about, there is of course the double resurrection team with the Cleric, the Valkyrie, and really you can put whatever 4th you'd like here, depending on your power level. If you're able to run the Mystic for her Doom ability to just boost that on death, we're going to be using the Fire of Wrath in a build like that. And again, this particular double resurrection build is really geared for players probably in about the 28 to 42 range, before they start encountering epic armors and things like that in PvP that are going to have high magic resistance and decrease their ability to put out that fire damage from the Fire of Wrath. But that's just another quick look at some heroes or some Wizards chosen stuff. Again, I said we would take a quick look at the classic teams here, and there are two traditional setups for the classic Doom team. That would be the Ranger, the Spell Sword, the Blackguard, and the Mystic. On this team, you're typically going to be running Rescue on the Ranger up front, and if you are struggling with survivability, you can put the Blackguard up front in this square formation here and put the Hell's Bulwark on him as opposed to the double damage passives. However, you can also run him in the back with the double damage passives, or if your gear and stars are high enough, you can even run him without the Hell's Bulwark in the front or the back position. And with the Spell Sword, for any newer players who are unfamiliar with his more common builds, you're going to really want to be running the Power Strike, Haste, and the Magic Missile. The Spell Strike is a melee ability. The Magic Missile gives you a little bit of snipe potential with them. And as such, you're going to always want to really run the Energy Reserves. That's one of his main utility uses, and what gives him most of his synergy with other heroes is the ability to start with that massive boost of bonus soul energy, giving you an instant soul skill. And you have the Magical Mastery here, which increases your magic missile damage, or the Martial, which increases your Power Strike. You're typically going to go with the Power Strike as it's a higher base damage ability. And there is some value to putting the Magic Missile as well if you want some boost to the snipe damage there. And as we've looked at before in previous videos, Double Strike, Vicious Strike, Tendrils are usually going to be your setup for the Blackguard. And then in the second team, in the traditional PvP lineups as they're known, is just featuring a simple basis of the Knight, the Cleric, the War Master, and the Shaman. The idea here is that the Knight is able as a pure tank to soak up most of the damage with his taunt and defensive abilities. Again, for any newer, lower level players, we'll have a quick look here at the main defensive build for the Knight is going to be Threaten, Parry, Sunder, with the two defense and armor passives on him there. The Perfect Katana, it's worth noting, has a higher defense rating than the Vorpal Sword at higher levels, which is why you'll see many players using it. Of course, with the Cleric, we're going to be using Cleanse, Powerful, Heal, Righteous Call, and the Healer and All Resist passives. We just saw what our War Master build looked like earlier on, and again with the Shaman, you're going to be using Wicked, Earth and Strike, Spirit Rage, Inherent Speed, and Inner Power. It's important to note once again that if you are a lower level player, one of the top tier items in the game early on is the super rare fist weapon, the Fist of the Dark One, this first one here. Most of you guys are going to want to craft that as soon as possible. The Shaman is, again, one of those standalone heroes that doesn't really need any assistance. And of course, there are a number of different variants on any teams, and especially at lower level brackets. Most every hero is going to be viable for you. In the 28 to 38 range, the Thief is a very powerful hero. Both the Thief and the Barbarian, if I can find her hiding around here, have access to the Ambusher's Hacker at level 37. That's going to be the first epic weapon available to you guys that are at lower levels. So it's important to keep in mind it's also very low cost, so you can craft one early and then later on craft another one at a higher level. End up throwing the first one that you made on a different hero. But again, that's just a quick look at some regular live battle teams and some Wizard chosen teams, again by request. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the Keeper's Corner and check out all of our videos as they come out. Make sure you leave a comment if you liked it, if you hated it, whatever the case may be. And we will catch you guys on the next one.